3 lives, 3 worlds, Lotus steps. Wherever step goes, Lotus blooms. Divine prayer. Lotus Step Chapter 27, Book 2. Since the big flood that night, the weather in the Jianghui Desert has been erratic and unpredictable. Sometimes the sun is scorching, sometimes there are storms, and in recent days there has been heavy snow. The camel team found a small oasis to set up camp. Yu was wrapped in a fox fur cloak with goose yellow satin embroidered with floral patterns and stood on a nearby sand hill looking into the distance. Jiaoxi stood not far away and stared at Yu. In the past, he always stared at Zhu Tiai's back quietly like this. This scene was so similar to that of more than 200,000 years ago that he didn't know where it was the ruby princess whom Ji Mingfeng loved, and the ancestral god whom Jiaoxi had treasured in her heart for more than 200,000 years, were actually very different in temperament. Qingyu is lively and affectionate, while Zudi is solemn and cold. The only similarity between them is the innocence between their eyebrows that is not stained by the world of mortals, even if they were born in it. But at this moment, the quiet and lonely figure standing on the sand mountain in the distance coincided with the divine posture of the ancestor god standing in the Pure Land in his mind, which made Jiaoxi's heart shocked. Just as he was stunned, someone suddenly heard a voice beside him. "The princess is becoming more and more like you, right?" Jiaoxi turned her head, saw the person clearly, and frowned slightly. The person who came was Lin, who had never dealt with him. After entering the mortal world, he changed his name to Zhu Jin. Zhu Jin's eyes lingered on his face for a moment, and he said calmly, "I actually know what you are thinking." Hearing this, Jiaoxi smiled noncommittally. "Oh?" Zhu Jin looked into the distance for a long time. "You have been in love with your majesty for many years and want to take her as your own. But once your majesty returns to your throne, you will have no chance. Of course you don't want her to return to your throne, right?" Jiaoxi froze for a moment, but he quickly reacted and replied calmly, "If you blame me for saving the princess in the flood, I didn't know at that time that the flood was a calamity created by heaven. But help her realize the truth and return to her rightful place." He paused. "I didn't intentionally destroy this calamity. We are both divine envoys, and my heart is the same as yours. Since returning to the right place is your wish, I will naturally do it. I will work hard to help her achieve this wish." However, after all, Zhu Jin is not the naive and slow Xuanghe, nor is he the gentle and tolerant Shuiyi. He has always been sharp and sensitive and difficult to fool. Sure enough, these words did not fool Zhu Jin. A clear look appeared on his face, and the corners of his lips were slightly raised, showing mockery. "Do you know what a divine envoy is? The only mission of a divine envoy in the world is to serve. Divine Lord, what the Divine Lord wishes is what the divine envoy wants. Your Majesty asked you to wait patiently in the mortal world. When she comes back to the world, you can take good care of her with me. But you have only waited for 30,000 years, so he entered reincarnation for selfish reasons." At this point, he smiled faintly. "Fortunately, without you, I successfully assisted your majesty in reincarnating for 16 lives. Jiaoxi, you have no credibility with me. Yes, I won't believe a word of these nonsense about how you will help your majesty fulfill your wish." Jiaoxi was silent for a moment, and her voice became colder. "If you don't believe me, why are you here?" Zhu Jin suppressed his mocking smile, and his eyes fell on Qingyu's back a few feet away. After a long while, he said in a deep voice, "This is the last life, and it is also the last calamity for your majesty. After completing this calamity, she will be able to go smoothly. Return to the throne. The princess must marry Wunuosu, must taste all the sufferings in this world, and complete the practice of this last life. In this calamity, I will not allow it to go wrong. If anyone dares to destroy it, I will stop the killing god, Buddha. Stop killing the Buddha." He turned around and stared into Jiaoxi's eyes with a sharp expression and a coldness in his pupils. "Do you understand?" Soon after Zhu Jin left, Chengyu also came down from the sand mountain, but Jiaoxi stood there for a while. Zhu Jin speculated that he had suffered all his words and the last threat. It wasn't that Zhu Jin's words were too strong for him to parry, it was just that he was too lazy to put on a show to refute. After all, Zhu Jin guessed everything right. But when he came to threaten him, he was threatening the wrong person. Zhao Shi thought that he probably didn't know that Lian Song had been looking for Cheng Yu these days. That's right, after all, Zhu Jin was not as aware of the entanglement between the two of them as he was, and he didn't pay as much attention to the water god's movements as he did, so the chess move was a little bit off. The person who will destroy this calamity is not him, but the water god, or should I say, it is not all him, but also the water god. After rescuing Cheng Yu from the flood, Zhao Shi actually wanted to take her away immediately. To avoid being tracked, he hid his traces and imprisoned all the land in the Jiangwei Desert to help him keep the secret. Unexpectedly, Zhu Jin was nearby and soon appeared. He really couldn't take the person away under Zhu Jin's nose. He wanted to follow him all the way to look for opportunities, but he accidentally learned from the water mirror that Lian Song actually started to look for him. It's become Jade. After thinking about it for a long time, he felt that this could be an opportunity. Zhao Shi was not always spying on the water god, so he didn't know why Lian Song broke his oath and traveled thousands of miles to look for Cheng Yu. He expected that he would learn the news that she disappeared due to the flood, but he couldn't bear it after all. I can't bear it, this is the most reasonable explanation. The wind and snow were blowing. Zhao Shi lowered his eyes slightly, and a mirror appeared in his hand. In the mirror, he saw the white-clothed water god braving the wind and snow in the desert and searching for Jade inch by inch. He suddenly remembered a story many years ago. At dusk, Goddess Sooty told him about her precognitive dream in front of a mountain waterfall. For the first time, he heard her voice full of emotion, but it was not for him. She said, "I saw majestic palaces and bustling streets. I also saw the Gobi Desert and the vastness of the world, and he traveled all over the mountains and rivers for me, tossed and turned, feeling depressed and worried. Then finally one night, he found me and told me that he liked me." That dream probably refers to the present. Zhao Shi thought coldly. Unable to find the guidance of the land, the water god walked tiredly every day and night in the sea of sand that had just been baptized by the flood and was devoid of any living creatures, searching in vain and anxiously for traces of the missing princess. At that time, the heartless and desireless god Zuti couldn't help crying when she saw this scene in her dream. At that time, she didn't know the reason. Now she knows the reason and understands that Lian Song was looking for her just because of the word unbearable. Will she still cry? Zhao Shi pursed her lips. Not anymore, he thought. He lowered his eyes and continued to stare at the water mirror. During the search that almost turned the Jiangwei Desert upside down, Lian San was very close to them. The place where Lian Song was standing in the mirror was exactly the path they took the day before. But Zhao Shi had no intention of reminding Zhu Jin. According to Yao Huang, Lian Song may know Zhu Hibiscus, so once the water god arrives, Zhu Hibiscus will definitely choose to avoid his influence and leave temporarily in order not to expose Cheng Yu's identity. And that was the perfect time for him to take Cheng Yu away. Zhao Shi expressionlessly put the water mirror into his sleeve. When he lowered his eyes, he saw the goose-yellow figure walking alone under the sand mountain towards the small oasis. He was quiet for a moment, then suddenly stretched out his 5 fingers and used a point in his field of vision. The misplaced closeness enveloped the phantom in the palm of his hand, and then he held it carefully and tightly. Zhao Shi's estimate was correct. Lian Song caught up with them very quickly, and at dusk the next day, it was faster than he expected. The snow has stopped, and the setting sun is just a round shadow, hanging far away on the horizon, shining quietly on this endless desert covered with thin snow. The stumps of giant trees ravaged by floods protrude ruggedly from the snowy fields, adding a bit of desolation to this vast desert. The sky is white and the ground is white. Cheng Yu is riding a white camel, sitting sideways between 2 humps, and is falling asleep to the sound of camel bells. The camel caravan suddenly stopped. She opened her eyes, raised her hand to lift the hood that covered her eyelashes, and then her hand stopped there, with a look of surprise on her snow-white face. The astonishment was like a flower that slowly bloomed on her delicate face. When it bloomed to its peak, there was only a blank space left. She put her hand down, keeping a blank expression, and her eyes fell on the young man in white standing in front of the camel team. She glanced briefly and then looked away. His appearance here must be due to the Emperor's order. If there is anything that needs to be handed over to the bride-to-be team, it will not be for her. She thought quietly and lowered her hood again, covering half of her face. In the ice and snow, the entire send-off team was wearing heavy clothing, except for the young man who suddenly appeared, wearing an unseasonable white singlet. There are traces of exposure to the wind and rain on the young man's body, and his face looks slightly tired, but this does not detract from his noble appearance. It still makes people think that he is shaped like a jade tree with an elegant posture, but also contains majesty. General Li, who was in charge of seeing off the bride, was the first to recognize the general in front of him, who was revered as the imperial treasure, and immediately led the crowd to worship him. Liansong didn't look at them. His eyes were fixed on Cheng Yu, who was sitting on the hump not far away. After being quiet for a while, Fong whispered, "You should stay out of the way first. I have something to talk to the princess." Everyone followed the order and retreated far away. Liansong Fong stepped up and slowly walked to Cheng Yu's white camel. White Camel's spirit felt the restrained pressure of the tall young man and immediately knelt down tamely. When Lian San just ordered people to go down, Cheng Yu didn't hear it. At this time, she was still confused as to why everyone suddenly retreated. When the white camel moved, she came back to her senses and found that her hand was held by someone and pulled her. In a moment, he was picked up by the young man. The white camel knelt aside meekly. She was held in the arms of the young man, and the strength of the embrace almost made her feel pain. But she didn't struggle. She was thinking, "What is he doing? I've been looking for you for a long time, Ao." The young man finally spoke and whispered in her ear. The voice was a little hoarse, a little tired, but very gentle. So gentle that it confused her. It must be that he has been in the ice and snow for too long, and the young man's arms are cold. Cheng Yu's heart is also cold, and it cannot be warmed by a long-lost hug. She remained silent. It wasn't until the young man noticed her abnormality and took the initiative to let go of her that she left his arms. She lowered her eyes slightly and said calmly, "The general came here because the emperor heard about the Shahang incident and was worried about me. So I sent you to look for me, right?" Why he suddenly appeared here was the most reasonable explanation she could come up with. As the general can see, she continued indifferently, "I'm fine. The escort team is also on its way to Wunuosu according to the original plan and will not delay the important affairs of the country. General, please tell me the truth and report to the emperor on my behalf that you are safe." The ice-like cold sun on the horizon seemed to be unable to hang on anymore, slowly sinking to the west, and a layer of hazy twilight enveloped the sky and the earth. Hearing Cheng Yu's calm and cold words, Liansong did not answer immediately. When she became impatient with waiting and raised her drooping eyebrows again, looking at him lightly, he whispered, "My coming to find you has nothing to do with the emperor's order. I just have to find you." While she was in a daze, he stepped forward and held her hand. "You want to ask me why, right?" But before she could nod or shake her head, he had already stared. He looked into her eyes and said the answer, "Because I like you and cannot allow you to marry Wunuosu." Cheng Yu was stunned, and after a moment, he slowly opened his eyes. Lian San gets to know Cheng Yu. Cheng Yu is like that. She always wraps herself up with thorns after being injured, but no matter how repulsive she appears, her heart is softer and more sincere than anyone else, so she has always been easy to coax. While searching for her, he had simulated their reunion 1,000 times in his mind. He had expected that she might be cold when she saw him, and he knew what he should do. As long as she knows his sincerity, she will put away the little thorns around her. Although she will not immediately jump into his arms like in the dream, she will definitely forgive him, and maybe she will have a little temper for a while, but from then on will lean on him softly and make peace with him. That's what he thought. The arrogant water god has been treated too much in this world, and his pride is engraved in his bones. He has never doubted that maybe this time he made a mistake in his judgment of his sweetheart. It was only then that he finally realized the problem when he noticed that there was not even a trace of joyful expression on Qingyu's face. The panic that the situation might be out of control quietly arose in his heart, making his heart sink suddenly. At this moment, Qingyu finally responded. She seemed to have listened to his words and said to herself, "Do you like me?" After stopping to think for a while, a careless smile appeared on her face. She shook her head. "Maybe you do like me a little bit." "Me, but it's just some." After making this comment, she raised her head and looked at him. The smile disappeared, and there was no sadness or joy in her clear water eyes, because the general once said personally, "I will marry, it doesn't matter if I marry anyone, kinda, it's my destiny. It's inconvenient for you to disturb me, right?" Lian Song was shocked. Cheng Yu continued, "So I am a little confused. When General Mingming first returned to Ping'an City and heard the news of my marriage far away, he was not touched at all. Why did he come to find me now and say that he would not allow me to marry far away?" She looked at him with her apricot-like eyes, which were still pleasantly moist, as if she always had a clear spring in her mouth, but at this time, the clear spring was without traces. Why this is so, this is something that cannot be explained clearly for a moment, but why she knew his unintentional words and then misunderstood him more deeply. In an instant, he understood. "Those words were told to you by Ji Mingfeng, yeah?" She looked away. "Night has fallen and it's time to set up camp. Fortunately, there is a small oasis nearby." General Li was directing the soldiers to set up camp and light a fire. Ji Mingfeng was also standing there, but away from the busy crowd, facing them, and seemed to be looking at her. Cheng Yu withdrew her gaze again and shook her head. "It has nothing to do with others. I saw it with my own eyes." When he learned that I was getting married, the general was actually not reluctant to leave. Xiaohua didn't want me to marry far away and wanted to ask the general for help, but the general didn't. I don't even want to see her. At this point, she paused, suddenly narrowed her eyes, and laughed at herself. "That's right, if you want to change me back, you can only send the 19th princess to go." Nuasu's wish. The 19th princess is the treasure in the general's palm, and the general will not let her marry far away. Since there is no way to get me back, it is okay not to see Xiaohua. If the two never meet again, she will never say these words in her life. His cruelty made her feel hurt and resentful, and less than a month was not enough time to heal those scars. She tried her best to face him calmly, but the pain in her heart was still lingering, and she could not help but express resentment in her words. As if aware of the resentment in her words, she immediately stopped, and her voice became as dry and quiet as an ancient well. "Between me and the 19th princess, the general has already made a choice, but now he comes again. I'm confused as to what you mean by looking for me, general." The calmer she spoke these words, the more heartbreaking they became. After saying that, she closed her eyes, so she didn't see the pain on the young man's face. She only heard the young man say after a long time, "You said I made a choice. Indeed, I once did something that I regret deeply now. But this choice has nothing to do with Yanlan." "Ew, you don't have to care so much about Yanlan. What happened between us has nothing to do with her." "Yes, the matter between us has nothing to do with the 19th Emperor's sister." The girl suddenly raised her head and interrupted him. Her lips trembled, as if she wanted to make a smile, but failed in the end. She just held that in her mouth, smiling in defeat. She said softly, "I understand very well, so don't worry. I will not bear any grudge against Sister Huang for this." She paused, as the general said, "Getting married is my destiny, and I have accepted this destiny. General, please come back." Lian Song felt that Cheng Yu had misunderstood something again. The water god, who had always been extremely intelligent, suddenly lost his ability to analyze the situation when facing his sweetheart who had hidden his true feelings deeply in front of him. He didn't know what she was thinking. The only thing he was sure of was that she didn't believe a word of what he said to her today. He looked at her until he saw her looking away unbearably, and then he spoke tiredly. "Why can't you believe me? Even he himself didn't realize that there was a trace of emotion in his slightly hoarse voice. Wronged. Tangqi was quiet for a long time. "I can't believe you," she whispered. "How can I believe you?" After a pause, she said again. It was like a question, but it was obvious that she didn't need an answer from him. She stared at the smoke rising from the kitchen not far away. "You like Tangqi, and you did not hesitate to sacrifice half of your cultivation to save her. You entered the mortal world for her, and even became a general, all to protect her reincarnation. You have sacrificed so much. That's what I like." The wind blew by, ruffling her hair. She raised her hand to brush it behind her ears. There was a hint of boredom in her eyes. "The general said he likes me. But what have you done for me? The general doesn't care whether I live or die, marry far away or disappear. How can you say you like me?" Lian Song was stunned. "So that's what you thought?" After a long while, he said. He really never thought that deep down in her heart, she would define him, Tangqi, and herself in this way. The water god, who has a full view of the inner world, can understand the world of billions of Savis, but cannot understand the thoughts of the beloved. He believed that he was ruthless towards Tangqi, so he sacrificed half of his body to cultivate to save her, just to verify the existence of not empty. He never felt that his half-body cultivation was worth anything. Breaking one's cultivation, saving Tangqi, and proving that it is not empty are just a few interesting and meaningful things on the long journey to immortality. If you do it, you do it. If you don't do it, it doesn't matter. Only for Chenyu, he couldn't think about it, tossed and turned, and was obsessed with it, unable to relieve himself. In his opinion, the greed, anger, and infatuation caused by Chenyu are much rarer than half-body cultivation. However, in the eyes of mortals, what he did to Chenyu was indeed less than 1/1,000,000th of what he did to Tangqi. My relationship with Tangqi is not what you think. In the end, he could only say this sentence, and he himself knew how weak it was. But her world, weary face, and the suffocation in his heart that he couldn't ignore made his throat sore, and he couldn't say any more words. Then he saw her crying. The tears came suddenly, right after his pale explanation. She still didn't believe him, he thought feebly. "I actually hate you a little," she said quietly. She had cried in front of him many times, and he was very familiar with her tears. She would cry when she was very sad, but when she was so sad that she didn't know what to do, her tears were always very calm. "I know it myself. In fact, I have no reason to hate you. You once warned me to stay away from you, but I didn't want to listen, so it's my fault that I'm in this situation. But I can't help but hate you. You." She sighed and said the decisive words of hating him, but when she turned her head to look at him, the ends of her eyes were red, and she clearly looked soft and vulnerable, but her rejection was so firm. "General, I never want to see you again in my life," she said. It felt like a basin of snow water was poured down on my head, sending a chill straight into my heart. Lian Song froze there. She made him feel pity and pain. In the past, he always thought that she was just a petite child who did not understand the word love. Therefore, when he used those cold and cruel words to cut off the relationship between the two, he did not realize how deeply it would hurt her. He only thought that she knew something. Well, he was the only one in pain. But now I know how deeply he hurt her. He couldn't blame her for building armor to protect herself after being injured. He couldn't blame her for not trusting him, and he couldn't blame her for never wanting to see him again in her life. After saying those words, Tangqi turned his back to him and said again, "So, General, please come back." The world was quiet, and Lian Song felt cold all over. The coldness was so sharp that he was unable to deal with it, as if he were in the thousands of miles of ice at the bottom of the North Sea that punished sinners. The camel caravan that sent the bride off went all the way west. According to the map, it would take 2 days to reach Jade Lake, known as the heart of the desert. Behind the Emerald Park lies a vast desert. The quiet Samur River flows down from the plateau and flows through the silent Gobi Desert. At the end of the Samur River is the border between Dashi and Wanuosu. The imperial master held a camel in one hand and a map in the other, and looked at it for a long time. He spoke to Tianvu, who was walking beside him in confusion. "Miss Tianvu, you have served His Highness for many years, so you should know His Highness very well." Tianvu said modestly, "I don't dare to take it seriously." The imperial preceptor ignored whether Tianvu dared to take it or not, and continued on by himself. "In your opinion, what's going on with your highness now?" The imperial preceptor sighed. "Since I can't bear to leave the princess after all, how about going to heaven and earth? It's easy to find her, shouldn't we take her back immediately? But His Highness, it's better to just follow her all the way, and after another 7 or 8 days, we can personally marry the princess to Prince Naminda." At this point, the imperial master had a sudden thought. Could it be? His Highness really planned this? Since he has no chance to meet the princess, it would be better for him to hand her over to a trustworthy person. In the hands of someone she can rely on, she will be safe for the rest of her life. And he will feel at ease. The relationship between Lian and Cheng is tangled and difficult to resolve. As a foreigner, the imperial master does not understand the word love, but he believes in loyalty and hopes to have enough emotional knowledge reserves to help him understand his friends at critical moments, so he spends these days immersed in love. I read a lot of Qing Tian and Ai's storybooks. Judging from the eye his brain is thinking about things now, you can tell that he has achieved some success in his magical skills. Tian Buzheng Erbajing considered the possibility of the imperial master's inference and shook her head rigorously. "No, I don't think so." She gave a very rational argument. His Highness is not such a deity who sacrifices himself for others. This argument was so weighty that the imperial master didn't know what to say. Tianbu pondered for a while and then said, "The princess is still angry with His Highness. Under such circumstances, taking the princess back directly will add fuel to the fire. I guess that your Highness may be waiting for the princess calm down." The imperial master thought for a moment and nodded. Yes. Of course, Tianbu didn't know that Qingyu was not angry, nor did he know that the princess and her highness were not taking it easy to meet again after nearly 4 months of separation. Not only is it not calm, but it is also full of sorrow and heaviness that is close to rupture. After all, on the 3rd day after Lian Song found Qingyu, she and the imperial master led Yanlan, who looked like a drag bottle, all the way to find her. She had no idea what happened between the two. Yes, they brought Yanlan over, which was really unwise. But after accidentally hearing the news from the imperial preceptor that Lian Song was ruthlessly searching for Qingyu, Yanlan was shocked and threatened to die, so she had to follow him. The imperial master couldn't stand her method of crying, making trouble, and hanging herself, so he had no choice but to follow her lead. At this time, Yanlan was sitting on the camel led by the imperial master, with her palm-sized face sunk in the windproof hood, with a gloomy expression. She couldn't help but interrupt the conversation between the imperial master and Tianbu. "Hong Yu, she disappeared in the flood, and His Highness is looking for her to make sure that she is safe. After all, there is some degree of friendship, and His Highness cannot bear it, which is human nature." As for what the imperial master said about fate, but not fate, whether to let it go or not, she bit her lip lightly. "I think it's all something that has no trace. It's just the national preceptor's own random thoughts." The imperial master disagreed, but did not refute. He was also frightened by the mist. He smiled lightly and said, "The princess is right. The princess said so, so that's it." Tianbu glanced sideways at Yanlan. Tianbu's movement was very small, so Yanlan didn't notice it. She probably heard the imperial master's perfunctory, and her face was a little embarrassed. She didn't try to say anything, but her moist eyes were fixedly watching the 3 people in front of her. Back view. Tianbu would occasionally be a little confused. Chang'e was obviously such an interesting person, but looking at Chang'e was always like looking at flowers in the fog, and it was difficult to see clearly. But Yanlan, the reincarnation of Chang'e, is so simple. She is not as pure as a white paper, perhaps more like a pool of living water. She is not very clear, but the good and the bad can be seen at a glance. For example, she wanted to come here regardless of everything. The considerate Tianbu could understand her meaning very well, but it was just because she was afraid that Lian San would really fall in love with Chengyu, and she wanted to stop Lian San from bringing Chengyu with him. Just go back to Pingan City. Tianbu didn't like Yanlan's petty thoughts very much and felt that her actions were useless and meaningless. 2 days later, we arrived at Jade Lake. The escort team set up camp in the delta at the mouth of the lake, while Tianbu and the others settled down a few feet away from the camp. The Imperial Master has read too many novels recently and has become deeply involved in the drama. He feels pity for the many infatuated children in the world who are wasting their lives, and also feels sympathy for Lian Song and Chengyu. In addition, seeing that His Highness the Third Highness seemed to have thought about it and showed no regrets that the rules of the world were not in his heart, the Imperial Master vowed to bring the two of them together, feeling that the love between man and God, although it is difficult and cannot be tolerated by heaven and earth, but because of this it was poignant and touching, and it was something worthy of helping. So I happily gave Tianbu advice every day and taught her step by step how to be a good supporter in the relationship of His Highness the Third. This is how the Imperial Master shared his experience with Tianbu. There is a story called The Romance of the West Chamber. Miss Tianbu, I wonder if you have read it. In The Romance of the West Chamber, the scholar Zhang Sheng and the young lady Cui Yingying had a conflict. The matchmaker next to Cui Yingying negotiated an agreement. For this plan, I think Miss Tianbu you might as well follow the example of that matchmaker. Of course Tianbu had never read The Romance of the West Chamber, and she didn't know Zhang Sheng or Cui Yingying. She was dubious about the words of the Imperial Master, but Tianbu had always been a loyal servant who was worried about his master's needs. Seeing that Lian Sanin and Chengyu had a quarrel and were depressed all day long, she naturally wanted to help his master relieve his worries. She cautiously found out The Romance of the West Chamber and read it carefully. After reading it, she was shocked to realize that there was some truth in the nonsense said by the Imperial Master. She followed the matchmaker's example and tried to talk it over, and maybe it was indeed a good idea for Ling Lian and Cheng to break the ice. A good idea. Tianbu pondered for a while and went straight to Chengyu's tent. Tianbu originally thought that since Chengyu had annoyed Lian Song, he must also be angry with her. It would not be easy to ask Chengyu to see him. Unexpectedly, she encountered no difficulty and was quickly led into the tent by the pear demon maid beside her. There is constant snowfall in the desert, but it is very warm inside the tent. The girl looked like she had just taken a bath. Outside of her water-red tunic, she wore a large gold mink fur cloak woven with a white background and draped over her shoulders. She leaned against a mahogany table and sat on the snow-white wool blanket. With her head lowered, she poured a bowl of buttermilk tea for Tianbu herself. Li Xiang, who was sitting on his knees, offered tea to Tianbu. Tianbu took a sip. The taste was very strange. She frowned slightly. Just as she was thinking about how to mention Lian Song to Chengyu, the girl spoke first. I heard that the residents west of Diamugwan don't drink tea. As a habit, everyone drinks buttermilk. I don't like buttermilk very much. A few days ago, when they were boiling buttermilk, I secretly added strong tea to it. I drank this tea-modified syrup and thought it was okay, but I didn't. Pure syrup is so hard to swallow. How do you feel about Sister Tianbu? Chenyu still called her sister and chatted with her in a natural manner, as if they were still in Pingan City. But Tianbu immediately recognized the difference. The young Master Jade in Pingan City is innocent and amiable, and can get along well with everyone, but the Red Jade Princess sitting in front of her at this moment has a sense of indifference, just like the flower of Yaoqi. Cannot be climbed or broken. After all, things are different from people. Tianbu thought about it for a moment, and then said to Chengyu in a non-committal manner, "The princess doesn't like buttermilk, so why bother forcing herself? Although it has the flavor of tea, buttermilk is buttermilk, and after all, it is not as delicious as tea soup." Chengyu smiled non-committally. When you enter a country, you have to follow the local customs. You have to get used to it. Tianbu was quiet. I wonder if the princess has thought about it. Maybe you don't have to go to the countryside. If you don't go to the countryside, you don't need to follow the customs. She pretended to bring the topic to the right track and coughed lightly. As for the princess's marriage, I think the young master must have a perfect plan. Chang Yu interrupted her. Sister Tianbu. She spoke. Her voice was a little abrupt, but it was soft and calm, so it didn't make anyone feel uncomfortable. She smiled gently at Tianbu. Long time no see, let's talk about something more interesting. Tianbu was stunned for a moment. She thought that Qinyu might not be willing to talk to her about Liansong, but she never thought that she would stop herself so bluntly. The words she had been pondering in her heart for a long time were blocked in her mouth. However, the friendship between the two of them in the past was all due to the Lin and Song dynasties. Now, if he wanted to talk about something else without Her Highness, Tianbu didn't know where to start. Qinyu helped her out. Tell me about Chang'e. There was a silver pot on the table, with a string of silver bells tied with red thread on the hollow handle. Chang'e, what is she like? Chang Yu lowered his head and fiddled with the string of silver bells, making a sound amidst the soft ringing of the silver bells. The voice was very soft, so it seemed ethereal. Tianbu was a little suspicious that he had heard something wrong. What? Chang Yu raised her head and glanced at her thoughtfully. After a moment, she seemed to suddenly understand and smiled lightly. Oh, you probably don't know yet. She said. He explained softly, I heard about it from Yanlan. I probably know the general's true identity, the relationship between Yanlan and Chang'e, and the relationship between the general and Chang'e. Seeing the shock on Tianbu's face, she smiled again as if she found it interesting. At that time, Chang'e, she supported her forehead with her hands, as if out of sheer curiosity. Why wasn't she with Your Highness? Tianbu finally understood why Cheng Yu, who had always been soft-hearted and easy to coax, now had this attitude towards Liansong. It turns out that there is Chang'e between the two of them. Since Cheng Yu learned about Chang'e's existence from Yanlan, who could probably predict what Yanlan had said in front of Qingyu that day, she couldn't help but feel a little annoyed, and with her mind racing, she calmly said to Qingyu, I don't know what Princess 19th said to the princess, but the princess should know in her heart that Your Highness likes you. Princess 19th has always seen it in her eyes, so she may be jealous of you. If her words make you unhappy, you don't need to take her seriously. She just wants to drive a wedge between you and His Highness. Chang Yu lowered her eyes slightly. Under the warm light, her profile was soft and quiet, with no expression, and it was hard to tell what she was thinking. Tianbu didn't know if Chang Yu had listened to her words. He was so confused in his heart, but he didn't show it on his face. He only continued, as for why His Highness is not with Chang'e, it is naturally because His Highness does not like Chang'e. And Chang'e doesn't like our Highness either. After a pause, she added, everyone in the 9 heavens knows that Chang'e likes His Highness Sangji, the elder brother of His Highness too. Chang Yu was quiet for a moment. Oh, he really loves her so much. She still leaned against the table with her chin on her head, her eyelashes slightly lowered. Her expression didn't change at all when she said this, and her tone was very straight. It was hard to tell whether she cared or not. But Tianbu was confused. She didn't understand what she said incorrectly, which led Qingyu to come to such a ridiculous conclusion. No, Tianbu felt that he could make up for it a little more. Princess, you really misunderstood our Highness. Your Highness really has no feelings for men and women towards Chang'e. The so-called helping her become an immortal, taking care of her, and even saving her later, it's just His Highness. But she couldn't finish her explanation. Qingyu suddenly interrupted her. How do you know? It was a rhetorical question, and the tone was not strong, so it did not seem overwhelming. After this question, Chang Yu lowered his hand holding his chin, and his gaze, which had been fixed in the void, fell on Tianbu's face. She looked at Tianbu for a while, then looked away. Liking for someone is actually a very personal thing. If you hide it deliberately, it will be more difficult for others to see through it. Only you can know what it is like. Maybe there is. By that time, being nice to that person has become an instinct, so even I didn't know it. Her voice was gentle, as if she was just discussing the matter. For example, I didn't know that I liked your highness before, and I didn't understand it until a long time later. It turns out that I actually like it. After saying this, she once again rang the silver bell tied to the handle of the silver pot. Tianfu was stunned. She never thought that the half-grown girl who was always happy and carefree and innocent like a child in her memory would one day have such deep thoughts. After a while, she murmured, "Princess, do you think so?" In fact, she had never thought about the matter between Lian Song and Chang Yi in detail. She just blindly believed in her understanding of Lian San and preconceived her own judgment. But as Chang Yi said, how could she know what Lian Song thought of Chang Yi? Does His Highness really dislike Chang Yi? Tianfu couldn't help but feel a little dazed. Just when Tianfu was in a daze, Chang Yu took the initiative to speak again. Perhaps Yanlan deceived me about some things, but she is the reincarnation of Chang Yi, which is always true. She pursed her lips slightly. With a bit of disapproval, she said softly, "But I don't believe that Chang Yi, who your highness thinks so highly of, would be like Yanlan." She paused. "What is Chang Yi like? Tell me about it." This was the second time tonight that Chang Yu asked her to talk about Chang Yi. Tianfu thought it seemed that she was really curious about Chang Yi. Tianfu was actually struggling a bit. He didn't know whether he should talk to Qin Yu about Chang Yi, but then he thought about many things that Qin Yu already knew, so it would be harmless for her to reminisce about old friends in front of her. Blindly avoiding them would easily lead to misunderstandings. Chang Yi, she looks very different from Princess Yanlan. She is more beautiful than Princess Yanlan. She thought for a while and then said. While observing Qin Yu's expression, he considered his words. Chang Yi is the owner of the flower, and she is like a flower in the mist. She is always hazy and makes people unable to see clearly. You think she is like this, but she is actually like that, as if she has 1,000 faces. She is a rare and interesting female fairy in Zhuangsu's 9 heavens. Seeing Chang Yu holding her chin, as if she was listening very attentively, Tianfu continued. Chang Yi is also smart. At that time, His Highness acted as the flower master and placed her under the seat. You also know that His Highness is free and unrestrained, too lazy to take care of many things, so most of the errands in the position of flower master were handed over to Chang Yi. Was capable and completed every errand extremely well, so not long after, His Highness became the co-manager of the Immortal Book. Emperor Donghua said hello, gave up the position of flower master, and pushed Chang Yi up. Chang Yi had a good heart, a good-looking person, and talents. Therefore, although she was promoted to the flower master under the exception, the flower gods and fairies here all support her. Recalling this, Tianfu was silent for a moment. Chang Yi has worked hard in the position of flower master for 720 years, and all the gods have praised him. She paused a little heavily. Originally, she knew how to do it. He had a bright future, but he was hindered by love. In the end, in order to fulfill his sweetheart, he unfortunately died in the demon-locking tower. She sighed softly. Princess, you will know what happens next. After she briefly recounted Chang Yi's life, she waited for a while and saw Chang Yu didn't respond, so she couldn't help but look up. Chang Yu lowered his eyes and remained silent. This was a movement she often made tonight, but at this moment, her expressionless face didn't seem like she was thinking, but like she was distracted. The cold wind howled outside the tent, and even the felt curtain was not thick enough. The wind rushed in through the gaps, causing the lanterns to sway and explode with a crackle. Qin Yu's eyes blinked slowly, and then she seemed to finally come to her senses. It sounds like Chang Yi is good, she said to Tianfu. After thinking about it, she added, she is a rare female fairy who is worthy of him. This is great. After saying this, she smiled. The smile did not last long and soon disappeared. Blank, decorated with a hint of tiredness. Tianfu frowned. She noticed that Chang Yu smiled a lot today, as if she was still the gentle girl she was in the past, and nothing had changed. But those smiles are very light and fleeting, and the brilliant sincerity of the past can no longer be found. It's more like a disguise to protect yourself. Tianfu's heart is a little complicated. But before she could express any more emotions, she heard Chang Yu say again, "Chang Yi is like this, so he won't make people unhappy." This sentence was a little incomprehensible, but Tianbu vaguely felt that he understood it. The meaning of Chang Yu. Sure enough, I heard her add another sentence. "The returned Chang Yi will no longer be so stubborn." I hope the general can get what he wants. Tianbu raised his eyes and looked over, looking at the girl's indifferent and beautiful profile, and suddenly couldn't remember what Cheng Yu was like in the past. I vaguely remember that she was a lively and brave girl. She was always energetic and not afraid of running into obstacles. No matter how many times she was rejected by Lian Song, she also had the courage to persevere. Sometimes he's smart, sometimes he's stupid. He couldn't see through that Lian Song was deliberately avoiding her. When he heard that the young master was not in the house, he felt a little shy and a little embarrassed. He said to her, "It doesn't matter. I'll continue to look for him tomorrow." He will earnestly and carefully tell her that once Lian Song returns home, he must send someone to notify her. But Tianbu suddenly couldn't remember that girl, her innocent and eager look, her smile. The only thing in front of me was her indifferent and calm appearance, as if she was very sensible, transparent, and considerate. Tianbu felt a little sad and a little pity. She didn't know what else she could say, so she drank a whole bowl of buttermilk tea, hesitated for a moment, and then left. Chinyu didn't keep him. On the way back, Tianbu vaguely felt that this visit to Chinyu not only failed to help His Highness the Third Prince, but actually made the matter more complicated. She rubbed her forehead, thinking that she would immediately go to His Highness Third Prince to apologize. But when they returned to their small camp, they did not find His Highness the Third. In the camp, only Yanlan's maid named Qing Luo stood guard in the tent in panic. The maidservant was confused for a long time before Tianbu realized that something big happened when she went to Qingyu's camp. Yanlan disappeared. End of Lotus Step Chapter 27, Book 2. By Tangqi English translated using Google.